everybody. Welcome to episode 4. And before we get going, I'm just going to give just a warning. Today's going to talk about trauma. So we might talk about different types of trauma and give some examples. So just so everybody's aware ahead of time, that is what is on the agenda for today. I just want everybody to be aware of that before they get into that. As a reminder, I am Marlene. I'm an LPC, a licensed professional counselor. Today we have two people with us. We have Bree, who's been with us before. She works in the mental health field.
Am I supposed to? Oh, hi, this is Brianna. My beverage of choice today is cherry Pepsi. So sorry.
And we also have Kelly, who is an LPC.
And my beverage of choice tonight is a margarita.
Ooh,
Fantastic. And I finally got wine. We're only episode 4 in, unwinding, and I finally have wine. And I am drinking, it's called a Flor de Moscato. It's a California sweet, salt of the earth. It's delicious. It's quite yummy. So that's what I got today. And as I said, today we're talking about trauma. And so I will start per usual with what it is, and that means I'll start with what PTSD is. For most people, when they think about trauma, they think of the big T trauma, which is PTSD. So what that is to meet criteria for PTSD, you have actually had to experience something traumatic, and that means it happened to you, you witnessed it, or you learned about it from like a close family member or friend, or you experienced the details of it over and over and over again, but not through like email. A good example of this is generations of people were traumatized by video of 9/11 because we watched it over and over and over again. And additionally, you also need to have flashbacks, distressing memories, nightmares, things like that happen. One of them, you don't have to have all of them. Avoid things, people, places, memories, things. All of those things generally come with that. Don't have to avoid all of the things. Again, generally just some of that. Impacts, like you have trouble remembering important details of the trauma, changes how you view yourself and or the world or other people, changes the belief. You either believe like distorted blame for what happened, blaming yourself, or overly blame other people, have a persistent negative emotional state. So angry all the time, fear all the time, guilt. Like a lot of this is just persistent. Have a hard time participating in things you like. Have trouble engaging in relationships. Struggle feeling positive emotions. Again, you don't have to have all of those, just a couple. Get irritable really quickly. Feel like you do reckless things, self-destructive things. Be hyper vigilant, so you're like always on edge, guarded, easily startled, poor concentration, poor sleep, trouble staying, falling asleep, things like that. Those are the big things. And for PTSD, the other thing is it has to have lasted for more than a month, these things, all of these symptoms, and cause big distress in your life. So that impact many areas of your life. And that really overall is the criteria for PTSD. And before we start jumping in and having the conversation of PTSD and like big T trauma and little t trauma, which is, I've experienced something traumatic, like the big difference between trauma and PTSD is trauma is experiencing a distressing or disturbing event, and PTSD is like the mental health condition that develops after experiencing trauma, right? And so you can't have PTSD without a traumatic event, but you can have a traumatic event without PTSD, and that's important to know uh, as we get into this, because not every trauma becomes PTSD. So, on that note, where would we like to head tonight in our conversation about trauma, ladies?
You know, I'll start us off. Building off of your last comment, when I was in school and I studied it from bachelor's into master's, one of the, actually, it was the foundational, like, theory that stuck with me was built by a man named Stolero. He wrote Trauma and Human Existence, and it was very existential based. And he focused on what you just said, is that you can have trauma and not develop that, PTSD, that it's all relatively subjective, and it really depends upon how people respond to you. Like that old adage that, what how people respond to us, what people think about us doesn't matter, actually really does, especially when we are dealing with a traumatic experience. And so, building off of that, a gentleman named Russell Carr, who was a Navy, or I think he was a Navy psychiatrist, did a study on that and found that individuals who had been through combat, those who were accepted by their peers, developed less symptomology consistent with PTSD than those who weren't. So, it really does hold true that, not everybody who experiences big T trauma, or probably even little t trauma, develops some kind of symptomology that's consistent with like a mental health disorder, especially if they are, loved on, to be fair.
That's a good point. Bree, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting the amount of after effects that come from any given situation. Like if you put me and you in the same situation, Arlene, we're both going to come out with different just different effects from it, even if we are both loved on the same way, kind of to Kelly's point, or treated the same way by our peers. I think there's still kind of that individual effect of how it just sits with you, and maybe how much trauma that you've already experienced. Sometimes there are things that I've said in passing that are kind of funny to me, and some other people are kind of like, oh wow, that's like a really big issue, and maybe that shouldn't be such a funny thing. But maybe at this point I've just kind of learned to that being, like a coping thing for me, and just kind of being desensitized to some of the things that happen around you.
I will take that. Um, and at least note this. Most people, actually, I think there's two people who fall into categories with like who've suffered trauma. There are the people who come to through one side of it and having dealt with it, who end up with very warped senses of humor. And they, to Bree's point, laugh at things they might not, the general populace probably don't. Um, and then there's the other group who's yet to get there. And they are generally stuck in it, and they might be sensitive to it. And it might still be difficult. And those jokes, those things might hit differently. And those are the two groups of people who've experienced trauma when it comes to like that sense of humor. And then there are the people who haven't experienced any kind of trauma and who are like, oh God, that can't be funny. And those of us who've experienced trauma are like you just don't get the joke.
Yeah.
But I just think that was a good point to point out of how that goes. Because trauma changes your perception.
I like to call it traumedy. actually.
I like that. Traumedy.
Mm.
And I feel you on that, Brie, actually, because it has created my sense of humor. It has deeply created my sense of humor. Um, but I agree with you on perspective. I think we all view the world through our own lived experiences. And I mean, that's really the only way that we can, right? Um, we all have the same, like, we all like content and process, basically. We all have different details of our lives. We all know what it's like to feel, but we process it differently. And that really does affect how we take in that information. And it's subjective.
I'd agree to that similar same point, right? Like this happens this happens in the same house with two kids who are raised the same way with the same parents. Even without trauma, they can turn out completely different and experience the same exact parenting styles and structure and still end up in very different places, to that point, because each person has their own individual personality, resilience, coping skills, structure, and how they perceive things. So while there is, yeah, some similarities in how things go, we can, you know, if we're talking about combat or like we're talking about domestic violence, um, talking about, school shootings, talking about rape or any of these big things, two people can experience them and still experience them completely differently.
Yep. But here's a good question, and it's one that I've been pondering for a while. In regard, especially in regard to its place in um, the DSM, is the subjective nature of bullying or something that is perceived as little t trauma and how it affects, and I go back to the subjective nature because bullying, well, it may be perceived as, little t trauma, can be very big T to a lot of people. Like
Mhm.
people have killed themselves over what the DSM might consider to be not big T trauma. And I think that's something that is we should be taking note of.
I don't disagree.
Do you think
I
there's
think
just
you
not enough time for little T trauma to turn into big T trauma? Like, for instance, those who have lost their lives due to bullying or whatnot, maybe they just never had the time for it to turn into big T trauma?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a really great question. Or maybe we're just not recognizing that to each individual, what we are saying is big T trauma outwardly, we're not looking at it as big T trauma to the individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think you both might be hitting it together, right? Like, right. The DSM criteria is like these symptoms have to exist for like a month,
Yeah.
right? And if we think about a typical case of bullying and note all the air quotes around typical, we generally think of, prolonged, long term, over months or years with kids in school or things like that, but that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very short term, but it's very intense. And so to them, let's think about this developmentally.
Right.
What is the most important thing to an adolescent?
Oh, friends.
Their friends.
There you go. Exactly. And if you are isolated from your friends and you don't feel like you have a peer group, then that is big T trauma.
Yes.
I mean, if we look at it from like that perspective, I think it would fit.
Absolutely. I would code it that way.
Yeah. Right. Just developmentally, like adolescents don't want anything to do with their fucking parents. Listen, I have two right now that do you know where they spend most of their time? In their caves called bedrooms. They come out for sustenance, like trolls in the middle of the night for ice cream and cereal.
My adolescent has four paws, or like paws, and all he wants is his mama. I'm like, son, Oedipus complex. But
Sometimes. But I'm saying like my kids love me, but
yeah,
they don't want me. They want to be on their devices talking to their friends. That's what they're doing. So to lose a social structure like that,
yeah, it's devastating.
even
Well,
if
and
it's
I'd
a
say like
perceived loss.
a lot of bullying, at least in my school, and maybe this isn't the norm, but when I was growing up, a lot of the bullying would happen after a specific event, right? Somebody did something embarrassing or something happened at a party and word got around or, something like that. And that's where kind of the teasing and whatnot would start. And I noticed that like, it would get really bad really fast and it might not last a long period of time, but it would amplify very quickly. Somebody would go from being pretty unseen to being the center of attention and not in like the best way. And I always wondered like how that would shape somebody long term just because it wasn't a prolonged incident and it wasn't something that happened for years and years, but it was something that was so significant for such a short period of time that it would be hard to kind of forget something like that.
That's a good point, Bree. I still remember instances of bullying when I was in high school, and I'm in my 40s. So, and I'm just one person. What do you all remember any
Yeah,
instances of bullying?
distinctly, like core memories.
Right?
Yeah, like I can remember vividly like seventh grade because we didn't have lots of money. Having a shirt that we got secondhand and it happened to be name brand and I couldn't pronounce it and being made fun of.
That's so silly. I can't pronounce half of these like clothing brand names, but what difference does that make? I'm pretty sure most people are saying stuff wrong anyways. Kids are crazy.
Right. But I like vividly remember that because it happened in front of my whole class.
Oof.
And I will tell you it was my history class. Like I vividly remember that. Like I'm almost 45. That was the seventh grade, guys.
I can meet you on that, definitely. Like remembering things from fifth grade, like
So
that. And again, I think it goes back to your point, Arlene, of it being a developmental thing and how important that is in those stages of life.
yeah.
How formidable it is for us, and I mean, we socialize first with our parents and then with our peer group, and our peer group is that important. So, I mean, working in the mental health field, is where, if we swing over to the diagnosis section for a moment and we're working with adolescents, you know, do you like take what is going on? A kid is coming to you and they're being bullied and they're exhibiting all of the criteria for PTSD, but it's not meeting that 1 month thing, but it's meeting everything else. What do we do? And that's my point of contention with it. It's like, this is where maybe some change should come in.
I agree. I also think like this is where we also get into the conversation about complex PTSD as well.
Yes, and I have some thoughts about that just in general. I have I have a client in private practice who had a psychiatrist tell him he was borderline just because he had I see her face right there. Yes, yes, queen. Um, because that is not yet a diagnosis. He is not borderline. He has no markers of borderline. He was
Okay.
just
So instead of just PTSD, he said borderline.
and yes, he was diagnosed borderline because he was sexually molested as a child and he had compounded trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon
So
trauma.
just PTSD wouldn't cut it. We just couldn't go with the good old fashioned standby.
Boom, boom. Yep, that was it. And I was like, oh, Jesus,
Bro,
take the wheel.
this is
And
why people have such a hard time finding good providers in this field.
I'm telling you, and I've been working with him for 4 years, and I'm like, bruh, you are not borderline, you just have PTSD. Like it's a compounded trauma. It's something, it's trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma. It's like a trauma sandwich. You know, you've
And
got
not a good one. It's not.
no,
It's not a good sandwich.
no, it's not even like a Philly cheesesteak, like a good Philly cheesesteak, where you've got the layers and the chops and all of that stuff, and it's like messy in the good way. Like it's no.
Just a
Um,
worn out Subway sandwich.
thank you,
Daniel.
right?
That's so the lettuce is wilty.
And
The tomatoes are mushy.
right, and the kid behind the counter didn't even take time to like
Didn't even put
put on
gloves on.
gloves. Yes,
The
exactly.
sneeze guard is facing the wrong way.
Yes,
It's a bad day.
precisely. And
The bread is 4 days old.
yeah,
So
it's
it
smelling
went
crunchy.
past like hard and now it's soft again.
There's mold on like the outer edge of the crust, and it's
Oh,
and so
and this is what I meant by fucked up senses of humor. You just describe someone's complex trauma as a fucked up sandwich from Subway.
and he would love
Ah,
it. He would love it. I promise you. He would be right here with us, being like, "Amen, hallelujah." But um, for the longest time, he was really damaged by that, and I was like, you have PTSD. That's what you have. The end. Period. From trauma. And it's compounded across your life. It's stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked. And it's made it a very complex case. That's what we're looking at here. It's just complex. And there are layers to it. And you kind of have to, it's like Shrek. It's
the
an
trauma
onion.
onion.
Yeah. You got to peel it back, and you don't have a donkey.
Exactly.
We need a donkey.
That's just fucked.
It really was, but as far as to swing back to the complex trauma, that I'm curious about your all's opinion on it because it's become a very big buzzword on TikTok.
This is why I started this entire podcast with my annoyance of therapy word du jours,
Thank you.
because not everybody is a narcissist, as Brie and I talked about the first time. And
I
not
love
everybody is gaslighting you, I promise. Sometimes people are just dicks.
that. Amen.
Um, but before I jump in, Brie, what are your thoughts on complex trauma?
Well, I think it might be helpful to give like the difference between what complex trauma would be as in comparison to just general PTSD.
All right. So while PTSD is like an event in which it lasted, all the symptoms that I gave before have lasted longer. Complex PTSD, um, in the nomenclature, is where you have experienced more than one traumatic event in which you maintain PTSD symptoms. So you may experience a traumatic event when you are 10, and then again at 15, and then again at 21, and then again at 25. And now you're just like the worst, like layering of shit known to man. And instead of like processing through any of them, the symptoms become compounded.
Well, thank you. That's very helpful. No, so the area in which I work in currently, we are definitely serving a large population of those who fall under the complex PTSD diagnosis range, right? A lot of them, that is a big diagnosis that they have. And I think it's interesting because if you know the theory, I suppose is one way to put it, of those who are traumatized are more likely to be traumatized in the future just because of the unhealthy behavioral patterns that might come with it, or not really being able to differentiate a good person in your life from a bad person in your life, struggling with relationships, and really just all of the things that can come with trauma. It makes it interesting how almost easy it is to become somebody who just has PTSD to somebody who has complex PTSD, just because of the after effects of being traumatized and kind of what comes from that.
That's a very
I
good point.
I agree. I think in my professional career, the amount of people with singular PTSD is a very low percentile to the amount of people who, if I could slap a DSM, an ICD code, and say you have complex trauma, they would. Because for all of the things you're saying, we can say that, like, you're right. Once you're traumatized, you're more likely, unfortunately, to be traumatized again. Some of that is because of trauma responses. Some of that is because trauma does fuck with you in ways of, like, if you remember, it changes how you view yourself. So you might have been on a trajectory to engage with healthy people, as Bree mentioned. Now you associate with all sorts of unhealthy people, right? Which puts you at a place where they could traumatize you. Reckless and self-destructive behavior opens you up to like substance use, which then sets you up to like all sorts of different traumas, right? Like, so there's a lot of different ways this can go. And then we could just go with the normal, like, sometimes these traumas happen because environments are shitty. And so because it was just a shitty environment, it allowed additional shitty traumas to occur.
No, those are all really good points. And in uh, in again, taking stock of the people that I've treated with trauma, I would agree with that too, that a lot of them would probably fall under the category of complex. I've personally, just as like for myself, I've always used the term compounded. Just it's just been my own nomenclature.
Yeah.
It's kind of come out recently as complex, but you know, like even for myself, through my own personal experiences as a kid and moving on, I mean, I would fall under that category in my life. But um the symptoms of PTSD do put people at risk for, without treatment, especially having these things happen to them again and again and again. And if we're looking at it from a public health standpoint, it is kind of problematic.
Yes. I agree. And we don't have time, nor is this the podcast for me to go on a tangent about the VA and treatment for veterans. Um,
I mean, we're just people in general.
but I mean, that is a population that significantly needs treatment for trauma. They are not the only one. Um, but
No, you're right.
this will go into like views of mental health.
But, Bree brings up a very poignant point that this is something that begets and begets and begets and begets and begets. So the big T, it seems like to me, the big T and the little T aren't that far removed at all.
They're not. No. I mean, not really, because it really is just about the person,
Mhm.
right? I I will guarantee that every human in America that was alive on September 11th can tell you where they were.
Yeah.
An entire nation of people was systematically in one moment traumatized altogether.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That happened we all know where we were. Okay. Now, we as a nation then decided we would continue to traumatize those that came after. Because on the anniversary of 9/11, we played the videos. We played the news footage.
I never thought of that, but you're right. You are correct in that. We still do
And
that.
we still do this. And to this day, I can't. I can watch certain pieces of the footage, but the minute they start showing people jumping out of buildings, I cannot.
That you're right. Huh.
I feel like you're right about too the idea that we're traumatizing those who didn't live through it. So I mean, I was alive when 9/11 happened, but I was quite young.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like at an age in which I remember anything. I think my mom said that I was in like daycare or something, because she worked at a daycare when I was young. Um, and she like took me and then went and got my brother from school, sort of thing. I don't remember any of that. I was way too young for that.
Yeah.
But I can remember growing up and watching those videos in school and having to learn about it in a way in which I don't think I've ever really learned about anything in that level of detail. And I can remember things about it that there's no reason I really should remember because I don't have any formable memories from when I was, 3 years old.
Right.
But I can definitely vividly remember what 9/11 looked like, and there's no reason why.
It's
You're
interesting.
correct. There is no reason why you should know that.
That is so interesting.
Mhm. Right? We took never forget for real.
And we still do that to
We
this day.
still do that to this day.
But here's moreover, if you don't do that, you're shunned.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yes.
very like
Non-patriotic.
and almost like volatile even.
Yes. You don't celebrate 9/11. You don't
Yeah,
remember it. You don't do the things. Yes. You don't engage in reliving trauma.
that's so I'll be honest, I'm getting like a deep feeling of uncomfy about that right now.
Yeah, I've had this for a long time about it.
I never considered that. Like I have considered that about how people celebrate Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and they're like, hoorah. That always made me feel uncomfortable, but with 9/11, it kind of fits with the same kind of feeling that I get with those days, as like, you want to do it for the patriotism, but all of these people lost their lives kind of thing. That makes me feel very uncomfy because these are all traumatic things that have happened to people that have destroyed their lives and the lives of their family. Generational trauma has come from these things passed
Yeah.
down.
Yes.
And
It forever changed the landscape of New York
yes.
and the people who live in New York. And
Mhm.
like we just discussed the community of New York. Like not just like our country, but like the community and the people who live in New York.
And New Jersey.
Right. Like all of that surrounding area. Yeah. I worked with someone who had um, OCD and
Mhm.
had compulsions around 9/11 because she wasn't old enough at the time and because she lived in New York, um, she had to compulsively watch videos to remember, otherwise she was a bad person.
Oh, that's sad.
I know. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. So this is why like it's a big trauma thing.
You know, what are your thoughts on that, Brie, as far as OCD and the connection between OCD and trauma?
I mean, I think they kind of go hand in hand, right? Like I have very few encounters with people who have OCD who haven't been traumatized in some manner, whether that be from their OCD or, maybe the trauma came first and the OCD is kind of what followed.
Mhm.
Um, but specifically those who are like struggling with like the checking type of OCD. Forgive me if I'm not labeling that correctly, but making sure their doors are locked and making sure that things go right in order to not be harmed. I
Yeah.
think that's yeah, they do just tend to go hand in hand, and it's understandable, right? Because like a part of it comes from trying to make sure that you're safe and make sure that things are going okay, and then it kind of crosses that line of this is just maybe a safety checking behavior into drawing that line into OCD. And when has this become a safety behavior and when has this become just a compulsion?
No, I agree. And the reason I'm glad that it came up is because something that has, and this might digress a little bit, but something that has come up here recently in my my circle is that a lot of people that I'm working with are recognizing that their OCD, whether it is, it involves like 9/11 or other things, they're recognizing that their OCD is traumatic to them. And so we come back, we kind of circle back to this idea of subjective and objective, big T, little t trauma.
Yeah.
And um, what is considered to be traumatic to someone else. And I agree that OCD is inherently traumatic. And so for, Arlene, for the person that you were talking about, sorry if you can hear my dog in the background. I think Zoom is pretty good with the noise cancellation, but he is going through some trauma apparently. Um,
Mm.
but uh one of the big themes this week that with the people I've been working with is that their subjective view of their OCD, regardless of what the theme has been is that it has caused them significant trauma in their lives, whatever it is. And it's interfering, not just in the way that OCD interferes, but on its own.
Yeah, I've stumbled across that too, working with individuals with OCD quite a bit in the way it consumes. And I think that in itself is traumatic. So I would agree. So, all right. As we wrap up, there is a song that always reminds me of the best example of trauma that I have ever seen in a music video.
Mhm.
And I'm going to date myself in my age, but luckily I've already done that. It is Usher's You Remind Me.
Really?
Yes. In the music video, every woman is different,
Okay.
right? And the song is the things about the woman that drew him in are the things why he can't be with the new woman is because he reminds me of the woman. And it's always a new woman in the music video.
Okay.
Back when MTV and BET had music videos, you know, back
I
in back in my day.
Hey.
But that has stuck with me as it is a great song by itself, but also a visual representation of how trauma works. Because it really had nothing to do with the women because they were all different.
Okay, cool.
I'm gonna have to watch the music video now.
Same.
Yeah.
Oh, kitty tail.
So, but
She
yeah,
just scared
that's
herself by sniffing. She sniffed and scared herself because she sniffed.
I love that. That is fantastic. But yeah, that's one of those things that's always sort of stuck with me as a great like example of being able to see a visual representation of like what trauma looks like. So perfect. Well, ladies, I appreciate you both for being here today. I hope the audience did as well. Appreciate our conversation today on trauma and all various aspects of it.
Oh, it was fun. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Of course. Thanks for showing up. Bree and all the cats, thank you as well.
Stars of the show.
Stars of the show. Per usual, the cats always steal it.
No pun intended.
If you enjoyed today's episode, follow us on Instagram at Unwinding Support or email us at unwindingmentalhealth@gmail.com.